didn't see you there. I was just reading about the Great Depression and how it relates to the Great Gatsby.
Why don't you come along?
(1920s) or the Jazz Age. They enjoyed prosperity and made most of every opportunity by having fun.
The 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties, was a great time of extravagant wealth and economic boost. The economy boosted a lot, and many people were rich, and there were not many poor people. But at the end of the 1920s, the stock market crash of 1929 occurred, and that resulted in the Great Depression and many people losing their jobs and many going bankrupt as well.
People squandered their wealth and enjoyed extravagant parties, lavishing themselves with luxury and leisure. Some might even say that the economic boom was revolutionary.
One cause of the stock market crash in 1929 was because of corrupt bankers. The corrupt bankers would take money from the banks and place it into their own wallets. They did this in order to maintain their lifestyles, which often involved fancy cars, big houses, and extravagant lifestyles. Through these illegal actions, the bankers damaged the economy and slowly helped cause the stock market crash in 1929.
There was a lot of corruption and deceit amongst the wealthy. They regarded their wealth and money with contempt.
The second cause of the stock market crash in 1929 was because of the supply and demand. Many companies often created newer versions of typical household appliances such as radios, cars, and refrigerators. But in order for people to maintain their wealthy appearances, they had to continue to purchase the newer products. If they did not continue to purchase the new products, they would be deemed as lower class. And even though it hurt people financially, they still had to continue to buy the products, and they bought until it hurts.
Since everyone was getting wealthy in investments and stock marketing, everyone was eager to buy some as well.
The third cause of the stock market crash in 1929 was because of the advancing economy. As the economy grew larger and became more advanced, many stockbrokers opened across the country, and because of these stockbrokers, buying stocks and trading stocks was more accessible to many people.
It's the year 1929, and everyone's rushing to buy some stocks. As the prices steadily rise, eventually the prices in stock markets reach a peak.
Many of these people were uneducated people who had no idea of how to handle stocks. So with these uneducated people handling these stocks and making very poor choices, it damaged the entire economy because of their poor decisions.
Soon, a panic arises.
The fourth reason why the stock market crashed was because of fluctuating stock prices. The stock prices would often rise and drop as often as well. But most of the time, when the values of stocks rise, they'd often drop quickly because no one wants to purchase expensive stocks. And once the value of the stocks drop, the owners flood to the stock markets, willing to sell all of their stocks in order to stop loss of money. But it will already be too late, and many of the people have gone broke or be financially damaged in a very critical manner.
For Daisy was young, and her artificial world was redolent of orchids and pleasant, cheerful snobbery, and orchestras which set the rhythm of the year. summing up the sadness and suggestiveness of life in Newton's. So in this passage, Daisy represents the frivolous spending and the careless fun that people in the 1920s have. She represents the people's sole concern of money and no real values. A world with only money and fun is a very artificial world, and by living in an artificial world, it really depresses her. She wanted her life shaped now, immediately, and the decision must be made by some force, of love, of money, of unquestionable practicality, and that was close at hand. That force took shape in the middle of spring with the arrival of Tom Buchanan. In this passage, Daisy is portrayed as a person who carelessly spends money. She represents the lives of the people of high consumerism and frivolous spending in the 1920s. Because Daisy only wants a life of luxury and wealth, Tom appropriately fits Daisy's criteria. For this reason, Tom is represented as the fraudulent corporates of the 1920s because he gives support to the frivolous spenders like Daisy. However, even though Tom supports her, it is not a stable relationship because it is built on fraud and lies.
Throughout the whole novel, but especially during chapter 8, Fitzgerald uses a lot of symbolism. Going along with the symbolism that Fitzgerald uses in this chapter, he symbolizes Daisy as frivolous spending and high consumerism, and just how, as Gatsby chased after her, how she led him to that downfall, and how that aspect of our economy, that aspect of how we spent our money during that time, during 1929, shows how it led to the Great Depression. Tom Buchanan and Wilson also symbolize what went on during the Great Depression, or the events leading to the Great Depression. Tom, he symbolizes just the fraud and deception in the business transactions, and just how people lied about stock marketing and how that price steadily rose through that. And Wilson symbolizes how people were tricked, people were manipulated during that time.
He stretched out his hand desperately as if to snatch only a wisp of air, to save a fragment of the spot that she had made lovely for him. But it was all going by too fast for his blurred eyes, and he knew that he had lost a part of it, the freshest and the best, forever. This passage is significant because at this moment it shows the downfall of Gatsby. By losing to Tom, he has lost to Daisy. Because Daisy was the only thing connecting him and his American dream, Gatsby not only loses Daisy, but he also loses the sight of his American dream. As he looks up and sees Daisy float away, he also sees his dream slip away as well. Even though Daisy corrupted Gatsby and his vision, it was still the primary motive to pursue his American dream. So when Daisy was lost in his life, his drive to achieve his dream vanished.
Fitzgerald uses a lot of literary elements, and one of them include color. For example, in page 154, he talks about Gatsby's pink suit. Throughout this whole novel, Daisy is described and just portrayed in white, and just that color white represents who she is, and that white is what he's seeking after. He's seeking after Daisy, and this pink suit, it shows how that white is tainted, maybe by blood, maybe by anger or hatred, but it just shows how he lost that grip, that hold of Daisy, and that hold for his dream, and just it's going to a downfall, and it's all ruined. Fitzgerald portrays Gatsby as a symbol for the stock marketing and economy during 1929, and it shows how when Gatsby died, it showed the birth of the Great Depression.
might have despised himself, for he had certainly taken her under false pretenses. I don't mean that he had traded honest stand to millions, but he had deliberately given Daisy a sense of security. He let her believe that he was a person from much the same spectrum as himself, that he was fully able to take care of her. As a matter of fact, he had no such facilities. He had no comfortable family standing behind him, and he was liable at the whim of an impersonal government to be blown anywhere but about the world. But he didn't despise himself, and it didn't turn out as he imagined. He had intended probably to take what he could and go, but now he found that he had committed himself to the falling underground. He knew that Daisy was extraordinary, but he didn't realize how extraordinary a nice girl could be. She vanished into a rich house, into a rich, full life, leaving Gatsby nothing. He felt married to her, that was all. This passage explains Nick's opinion of Gatsby's decision on Daisy. Nick expected Gatsby to hate himself for using such immoral ways to achieve his American dream, and to get Daisy. Gatsby not only lied to Daisy about his wealth and status, but he also lied to himself. Nick explains how, in reality, Gatsby did not hate himself and was convinced that everything he did to achieve his dream was morally right. Because Daisy was such a strong motivator for his American dream, he lost a sense of right and wrong. With Daisy as the focus of his dream, nothing else drew his attention and all his moral decisions were blurred. Daisy was the reason for his American dream, but she was also the reason for his corruption. They're a rotten crowd, I shouted across the lawn. They're worth the whole damn bunch put together. I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever gave him, because I disapproved of him from the beginning to the end. First he nodded politely, and then his face broke into that radiant and understanding smile, as if he'd been in the ecstatic caboose on the fact all the time. His gorgeous pink ragged suit made a bright spot of color against the white steps, and I thought of the night when I first came to his ancestral home 3 months before. The lawn and his drive had been crowded with the faces of those who guessed at his corruption, and he had stood on the steps concealing his incorruptible dream as we waved him goodbye. This passage is significant because first, Nick expresses his opinion of Gatsby. Nick states how he disapproves of Gatsby's choices in life, but it did not mean Nick hated Gatsby. Nick notices how this situation reminds him of the first time he went to Gatsby's home. Nick remembers how there were so many people in Gatsby's house for his party, but none of them had any real connection with Gatsby. The random people at the party were just objects that Gatsby used to get closer to Daisy. As Nick remembers the scene, he realizes that the only reason Gatsby and Nick are together was to fulfill Gatsby's corrupt American dream. So now that his American dream has slipped away, the connection between Gatsby and Nick has been broken. Consequently, as Gatsby waves goodbye to Nick, he is also saying goodbye to the last connection between Gatsby and his American dream.
Fitzgerald also uses the literary element of foreshadowing throughout this whole chapter. He gives that ominous foreshadowing that a mighty tragedy might befall Gatsby. And just as an example, in page 154, when Nick says goodbye after eating breakfast with Gatsby, it just gives that bad premonition that something bad might happen to Gatsby, and we later find out that he actually dies, gets murdered, and he uses this element to raise the suspense and anxiety.
In The Great Gatsby, it seemed as if Jay Gatsby also relied upon American loans in the book. As stated here on page 44 in chapter 3, it says that, I heard from that a man who knew all about him, grew up with him in Germany, he shared his party. The man was talking about Jay Gatsby at his party. Coincidentally, in the Roaring '20s, it seemed as if the Weimar Republic in Germany had relied upon American loans for their economy. It's a coincidence. Two Germans, Gatsby and the Weimar Germany, relied upon American loans as their basis for money and wealth. Coincidentally, seemed as if Germany and Jay Gatsby died in 1929, as both their economy and their wealth decreased. The Great Gatsby? The Great Depression? What's the difference? Now let's talk about the setting. The West Egg, where Gatsby lives, and New York, where Wall Street exists, are both in the same area. This also seems that in the same year, they both died, as Gatsby, of course, in the novel dies, and the Wall Street Stock Exchange dies also in 1929. Wall Street crash in 1929. Well, many wealthy people losing their riches and wealth. Jay Gatsby and the Great Gatsby also lost his wealth. Coincidentally, in the same year of 1929. Here, they both lost very important things. And for Gatsby, he lost his life and Daisy. In both, it seems as if the American dream just disappears and vanishes. What a coincidence. During this time, also known as the beginning of the Great Depression, President Hoover, said, "You should help yourself as no one will help you, or care for you." This was especially true for Gatsby, as in the end of his life and in his funeral, no one cared to show up for his funeral. It's a coincidence.
Well, it seems like by what we've seen today, Gatsby's downfall represents the effects of frivolous spending and high consumerism are cause for the stock market crash. The Great Gatsby, more like the Great Depression.